Let's see how they fixed it. I'm confused. I'm confuzzled.
Gotham Knights had some definite issues when it launched last
Who's this? Is this a new guy? I don't recognize his voice.
fall. A mix of lighting problems, odd technical hangups, and strange design choices undermined what should have been an attractive game. This was made all the worse from comparisons to its 2015 predecessor, Batman Arkham Knight, which was in many ways a more visually accomplished title. But the game's key fault came down to performance. Gotham Knights ran at a highly unsteady 30 FPS, with harsh frame rate drops, stutters, and frame time fluctuations. The game felt rough and jerky as a result, particularly when traveling through the open world. For a current-gen only title that was pushing unambitious visuals, this level of performance bordered on unforgivable. After 5 months of patches though, Gotham...
For real, I think that's the biggest and most offensive thing about it, is like, I think he usually does the retro videos. That's probably why I don't recognize him. I usually pop into Digital Foundry for the new stuff. But he isn't new. Okay, well, that's good. That's good. I just don't recognize the voice. Anyway, but with this, the reason why Gotham Knights like was so infuriating is that it was significantly, in my mind, less visually impressive than Gotham Knights, than Arkham Knight, which launched in 2015, 7 years before this game. So it was like, so it runs terribly and it looks worse than the game that is 7 years old. Okay, got it. It just, every bit of it was kind of insulting, which I think is the big thing.
Improved from that initial version. So is this?
Yeah, I think I'd be fine with 30 FPS if it was justified. Well, yeah, it like I've said this since the start of this whole like 30 FPS debate. I find it really stupid that people are like, 30 FPS or I boycott. Like, some of the best games that like we all agree are amazing games were launched at 30 FPS. Red Dead Redemption 2. Everybody loves that game. That game's amazing. And it launched at 30 FPS. Does it suck all of a sudden because it launched at 30? Is that not a good game at 30? It's a very good game at 30, even still. Breath of the Wild. Pretty sure that launched at 30. So like all these games didn't launch magically at 60 and they were still great, okay? Like games can run at lower frame rates and still be great. I prefer higher frame rates, don't get me wrong. I greatly prefer higher frame rates. But a game doesn't suck because it runs at 30, okay? Thank you, Francisco. My goodness, thank you. It's gonna read it, don't worry.
Francisco C. super chatted $4.99.
Thank you.
Would you consider Avalanche Studio the 18 now for WB Games, and do you think MK12 is missing an opportunity with other fighting games this year?
Multifaceted. I would not consider them the A team, maybe one of their A teams, but they still have some amazing studios. They have Monolith still, which they're working on the Wonder Woman game. They previously did all of those Middle Earth games. So they have some phenomenal studios under their belt. So I would not say that they are the A team, but they certainly now have earned their place to be considered among those other ones, I think. As for Mortal Kombat, I would say that I'm not really in tune with the fighting games enough to be able to say confidently, like, yeah, they're totally missing an opportunity. But maybe for them, it's just, hey, we're going to wait another 6 months or an extra year or whatever, polish the crap out of it, add some extra stuff, and have a year to ourselves in 24, if that's when they're launching. So it's probably not a huge missed opportunity. They're just going to wait till they can be the center of attention, which is fine. Daniel, thank you for becoming a member. Also, thank you to Peak Resolve for becoming a member and Walnut for becoming a member. Appreciate you. All of you. You guys are great. The Last of Us, Uncharted 4, GTA 5, Yakuza 6, Kiwami 2, Kingdom Come Deliverance, all 30 FPS at launch. Yeah. Great games can be at 30, but they have to be great games. Like, that's the operative piece of this puzzle, okay? They gotta be great games for you to be like, okay, 30, not a big deal. But Gotham Knights was like a pretty lackluster game and barely ran at 30. So across the board, like, it had no redeeming qualities to make it okay.
This game finally in reasonable form, and have any of its visual faults been addressed?
It's such a bummer because they could have done so much with this like New 52 thing. You guys will see, like back here, I've got the New 52 comic books. There's so much potential here. They could have done so much with
Daniel
it.
Embretson super
just blew
chatted
it.
$10.
Thank you, Daniel.
30 FPS works great if you can be immersed in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think to balance 30, you need great art design. You need a stable 30, to be clear. And like somebody said earlier in chat, we can justify 30 if it's justified. Like if there's a reason for it being 30. Like Arkham Knight, one of the best looking games probably ever released, way ahead of its time, and that launched at 30 FPS on consoles. But that was justified. You look at that game and you're like, okay, yeah, no, 30 FPS, fine, I'm happy. But you know, that's just, it is what it is. Where's the balanced 40 FPS mode on consoles? I think 30 FPS is just, in terms of marketing, it's not easy to sell people on 40 FPS because the film industry for decades, almost a century really, was based on 24 FPS because it was the lowest frame rate where you could pretty much still get relatively smooth motion. So, and because they were filming on physical film, they needed to save as much film as they could over the course of a shoot for a film. So they said, okay, well, we'll do 24 because it's the lowest frame rate that we can possibly do that still looks smooth. So they did that for like a century, and it became sort of like the cinematic look. So then even after physical film was not a constraint and we were filming digitally, still a lot of films choose to film in 24 FPS. And so you double that and you get up to 48, which is a little better. You guys might remember, I think it was The Hobbit. They did 48 frames per second, and when they released that in theaters, people lost their minds. People were saying it's too disorienting, it's too smooth, it made me motion sick and stuff, which was really funny. I mean, honestly, it's pretty ridiculous. And then even now they're playing around with frame rates in movies. I did see Avatar: The Way of Water 2 nights ago for the first time. Finally saw it. An okay movie. It's a spectacle movie. It's one of those movies. It's like, you know, a presidential inauguration or Michael Jackson's funeral. You don't care if you see it live, but when you see it live, you're like, okay, I guess I'm glad I was here. And that's it. And so, like, it's not a movie I'm going to be watching upstairs, like in the living room, casually. It's not one of those movies, but it was fine. The one thing that was not fine is the dumb, soft-brain decision to swap between frame rates. If you guys haven't seen it, they swap between frame rates like shot to shot. There's some shots where they film it, I don't know if it's at 48 or if it's at 60, but they swap to a high frame rate in some shots that are like action oriented, and then they swap to low frame rates for other sequences that are more slow moving and narrative. I find it so stupid. It's so stupid. I was baffled. The whole movie, it like was pissing me off. I was like, well, that's the thing. Mr. K, I asked Nikki was there, and I asked her what she noticed about the movie. Her thing that she didn't like was how often they put particle effects in the foreground. She felt like it was just trying to flex the 3D thing, because we saw it in 3D. And I didn't really notice that, but she didn't notice the frame rate shift. She didn't notice that. I will say also, they fade to black like 15 times in the movie, and you guys know how I feel about fade to blacks. So I don't know. And then it's like they hit a lull in the story, and they're like, let's just spend 10 minutes showing people swimming with fish.
Gotham Knights performs much, much better as of the latest patch than it did during the launch period. Going back to the initial release, it had 3 key performance problems. Firstly, the game was frequently beset by conventional frame rate issues. Gotham Knights tended to buckle a bit when traversing through the open world, with harsh drops often characterized by stutters, down as low as 83 milliseconds or so. Performance profiling on the PC version revealed that most of these problems were CPU related, though the game could exhibit more stable, extended performance dips where it did seem GPU bound. Secondly, Gotham Knights had issues issues with frame delivery. You'd see a mix of 16, 33, and 50 millisecond frames in general gameplay, even when the overall frame rate didn't really fluctuate from 30 FPS. The game never felt truly stable, with bizarre frame time fluctuations that came as a byproduct of their chosen frame rate capping method. Finally, the game would occasionally chug with no clear driving factor like in the train terminals. Gotham Knights had some issues with bugs and general stability, and that extended to some inexplicable problems in select areas at times. These issues made Gotham Knights' 30 FPS frame rate target feel messy and sort of broken. It was one of the worst performing major titles on current-gen machines, with obnoxious performance woes that had a constant impact on playability and fluidity. But after a concerted patching effort, the situation has been dramatically improved. Looking at the PS5 release, we're getting close to a locked 30 FPS. Interior scenes
Close. Still not locked, okay? Still not locked. Ooh. I mean, I'm glad they're patching it. Let's be real. They could have just walked away, and I wouldn't necessarily blame them. This was received pretty poorly, so I wouldn't be shocked if they walked away. But instead, they're patching it. They're trying to work on it. But, man, we're what now? Like, what are we, 6 months after launch or something like that? And they still haven't hit the 30 FPS target reliably? That's rough, man.
Playback without any issues whatsoever, absent of the frame time troubles that we observed at launch. The choppy, inconsistent motion has been completely solved here, and we're locked to 30 FPS.
Good.
It really is a huge upgrade. Open world traversal, where the launch release suffered most, is also very stable. Long stretches run at a perfect 30 FPS even when speeding through Gotham City on the bat cycle. I can't say it's completely perfect, because there are one-off dropped frames that do pop up every so often, though not more frequently than every few minutes or so. For all practical purposes, open world gameplay just hugs that 30 FPS update. The opening bike chase, which is possibly the most consistently demanding scene in the entire game, provides a helpful illustration. The updated PS5 code is almost a flat line here with just a handful of dropped frames through the entire sequence, while the launch version
That's
goes
way
on a bit
better.
of a frame time roller coaster ride. There are extended dips, sharp stutters, and plenty of 16 millisecond frames sprinkled in for good measure on that original code. The new version brings a night and day improvement and is a much more enjoyable experience. The Xbox consoles follow essentially the same pattern. Interior scenes run at a locked 30 FPS, with outdoor scenes not entirely perfect but much improved. Both Series S and X feel much better to play than in their initial forms. Unfortunately, they do lag behind the PS5 release here, despite the enhancements over the launch code. The primary problem comes down to dropped frames during fast traversal. Both Xboxes have the same problem here, a predictable, if somewhat infrequent pattern of 50 millisecond frames when driving at speed.
I want to touch on this, because this is something I saw, I saw some fanboys on Twitter going off on. And so, let's just address this outright. People look at stuff like this and they say, oh, so look, the PlayStation version of the game runs better than the Xbox versions, so therefore the PlayStation 5 must be the superior console. But, what I think it is, I don't think it's any more complicated than just simply the fact that there are more PlayStation 5s out there, and thus more people playing these games on PlayStation 5 than on Xbox. So in terms of priority, if you're a game developer trying to polish the game and refine it, where's your priority going to be? It's going to be where most players are. So if most players are on PlayStation, because the PlayStation 5 is a very successful console, then you're going to spend more time polishing and refining the PlayStation version. It's pretty simple to me. I don't think it has to be more complicated than like a grand conspiracy that, oh, well, the Series X is actually significantly weaker than the PS5. Everybody I've spoken to who's in game development, it's like, they're slightly different, but they're pretty much the same. And any targets you can hit on the PS5, you can hit on Xbox and vice versa. It's not a big deal. The Series S is the question. I mean, a lot of people are iffy on the Series S, and I'll grant you that. If they came out and said that the Series S is holding this back, I would not be surprised at all. But, to me, when I see that the PS5 version runs better than the Xbox version, to me, it's just a matter of priorities. And as I touched on before, you guys might remember that story that came out back in, I think, November. PlayStation assigned over 150 employees to help with the production of the Callisto Protocol, because they wanted to make sure that the game ran the best possible on their platform. They wanted it refined. So Sony's invested a lot of money and time and employees and labor into refining the game on their particular platform, which is something, honestly, Xbox should be doing too. I think that this is a very good idea. But it again reaffirms, Jim Ryan's strategy recently has not been to buy out exclusives, where they buy exclusive rights to Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, but instead they pay for advertising rights, and then they pay to help them polish the game on PlayStation so that when people look at like the reviews, they see, oh, it seems to run better on PlayStation, so I'll pay it. I'll play it there. So this type of thing is like pretty common. So I just want to get that out of the way now. Like, it's not actually a matter of power that causes the differential in performance with these patches and these versions of these games. I think most of it just comes down simply to the fact that the PlayStation 5 is just a more ubiquitous console. More people have it.
These tend to pop up perhaps every 15 or 20 seconds or so, often clustered around loading thresholds and intrude frequently enough to be a little bit distracting. Larger stutters can still pop up as well, though again to a lesser degree than in the launch version. If we put the same difficult bike sequence in its old and updated forms, we do still see a transformative frame rate boost. When the game is under heavy stress, the improvement is clear. It's really just those momentary loading drops that continue to pose an issue, albeit a much smaller one than at launch. The other Xbox Series issue comes down to some odd animation problems in certain cutscenes. Essentially, object and camera animation run with inconsistent travel at times, which is particularly noticeable during broader movements. Frame rates are locked to 30 FPS here, but the actual underlying animation looks as if it's not being interpolated correctly. Curiously, this issue doesn't seem to be present in the launch Xbox versions or on the PS5. Hopefully this can be fixed, as it is pretty distracting.
Weird.
So the consoles are much more consistent performers as of recent updates, so what exactly has changed? The patch notes unfortunately don't provide many clues. While Gotham Knights has been updated many times since launch day, including patch 4.0, which came out earlier this week, most of the notes are pretty unclear, specifying performance optimizations or improvements. One detail does stand out here though. An early update claims to have implemented dynamic resolution. The launch versions came in at a locked 2160p on Series X and PS5 and 1440p on Series S. The maximum resolutions are the same as of the updated release, though mostly the game continues to come in at those top-end figures. PS5 and Series S both clocked at the same resolutions as before in every shot I tested, while Series X reached a low of 2016p at worst. I wasn't able to get the sort of comprehensive pixel counts that I usually aim for, as Gotham Knights has several image-altering post-process effects on console. Chromatic aberration, motion blur, and depth of field that can't be turned off and strictly constrain the instances in which a raw pixel edge can be easily found. I imagine that the resolution dips more frequently during challenging moments in gameplay, though this would be hard to notice. One predictable solution for performance improvement might be to reduce the game's simulation complexity. The launch version had remarkably sparse NPC and enemy density in the open world, for instance, perhaps a concession to ease CPU load. But in the new version, I couldn't spot any consistent decreases in density at all. I also couldn't find any downgrades to the game's ray tracing, which is present on PS5 and Series X. It seems roughly as detailed as before in the shots that I compared. The ray tracing still makes significant reuse of screen space information when available, and distant geometry is often absent from the BVH structure, but the resolution of the RT is relatively high.
Just once again shows you that ray tracing really is not the name of the game. Like, Arkham Knight didn't have this, didn't have ray tracing, and it still looks amazing. Still looks amazing. But then here, it's just not there. PC performance, they're about to do it right here. So, like, ray tracing, it's a cool gimmick, but this is a great example of how you can have ray tracing, but it's not going to magically fix your game or make it look good, you know? Like, it's just like, it's not the end all be all.
PC performance in its launch release. The game was CPU bound, just like consoles, and was mostly limited by the performance of a single CPU thread during open world gameplay.
Oh god, it's so cringe. Having one CPU core that dictates all performance. I get it. Well, I don't get it. I'm sure that it's very difficult to like scale this stuff, and a lot of engines nowadays seem to be limited to like one CPU core. I play games on this monster gaming PC, and I can't get it to usually crack like 5% CPU utilization. My GPU can be maxed out, but like CPU is like 5%. So it's all pretty much bottlenecked by the GPU, it would seem. But in reality, it's being bottlenecked by the single core of the CPU, because it only takes like that one little piece of it, which, you know what? I think, wasn't it Kerbal Space Program? Didn't they add in like a multi-threaded, multi-core processing thing, and it like quadrupled performance instantaneously? It was crazy. Something like that. But I mean, I'm sure it's very difficult to implement that. Guild Wars 2 runs on one CPU core, and it is murder for the game. Yeah, it's just, it's got to be difficult, because every game nowadays seems to be doing the same kind of thing. So it must be an issue with just how engines work, or maybe it's that like they can't rely on or scale for all the different CPU types. So instead they just limit it 1 core. We'll just worry about that. But it seems like such a weird choice, because nowadays, like, who's running like a single or dual core CPU on their computer? Like, who on earth is doing that? Not many people. I think nowadays most gamers are at least running like quad core chips, because I think, are the i5 chips from Intel, are those dual or 4 core? I thought they were 4 core. Maybe they're only 2. But even then, it shouldn't really matter. Synchronization is very hard in programming. Yeah, no doubt. I'm just surprised that like even Unreal Engine stuff is having problems. 4 to 6 for i5. Okay. Well, i3 core or i3 chips are dual core, I think, across the board. And then they have like Celeron beneath that which are all like single core for like portable laptops. You're not gaming on anything like that. Modern engines use multiple cores. It's old engine that does not. Well, this was Unreal Engine 4, I believe. Am I wrong about that? I'm pretty sure it's Unreal Engine 4, which I thought, I would think that they fixed it, but I mean, who knows? Unreal Engine 5, I did see a demo the other day that was pretty cool. Maybe we'll pull that up. Unreal Engine 5.1. It's pretty badass.
Knights also suffered from serious shader compilation issues during the game's early
Oh
sections.
God,
As
you
of the
remember
latest
that?
patch,
Oh,
the
I
game
remember
suffered
this.
From serious shader compilation issues during the game's early sections. As of the latest patch, the game's performance woes have been largely alleviated. Just take a look at the game running on Alex's mid-spec test PC here. Shader compilation is no longer an issue, as the game pre-compiles shaders during its first boot, and frame rates are much improved during CPU-bound sequences. We're still short of 60 FPS during a lot of the open-world traversal, but frame rate averages have improved by 10 to 15 FPS or so since the initial release. I played through roughly the first hour on my high-end PC on maximum settings at 4K with DLSS 2 in its quality mode.
Okay, here's a question. Do you think that like these devs, because the shader compilation thing, it's only a problem and it only causes stutters during the initial like compiling of the shaders. So after the shaders have been compiled, it's no longer an issue. So my question, like, maybe this is like a conspiracy theory kind of thing, I don't know. But my question is whether or not these games get released with these horrible shader compilation issues, which you'd think they would notice because it's such a huge glaring problem. But do you think it's because like the PCs that they're testing the game on compile the shaders and so they just don't realize that they have shader compilation issues? Is it something that dumb? I would think that they would do like multiple tests where they reinstall graphics drivers so they like can see that. You would think. But it happens so regularly where you like for gamers on PC, they're like, holy crap, this is a problem. And yet the devs always seem surprised. You know, like, how did you not realize that this was a problem? And then, you know, they very quickly, within like a day or two, they update a patch that does shader compilation stuff. And it just all of a sudden is like fixed. I don't know if for Unreal Engine 4, if it's like a button that you press and it's like enable shader compilation in the menu. You add that and then it compiles shaders in the first boot. I don't know if it's something that simple, but it's just crazy. Hogwarts compiles shaders on boot, so they must have known. Well, they knew. Yeah, and I believe that's also an Unreal Engine game. So devs aren't surprised, but leadership tells them, or probably tells them to ignore it. Maybe, but I just can't imagine it's that like low of a priority. Because if anybody boots the game up, it's going to be that bad for the first time on PC. The reason shader compilation issues are such a major problem for these games of the last like year has been that it doesn't matter how good your hardware is. If it has shader compilation issues, it will affect your hardware. This is a 4090 and it will still stutter like a bitch with games like the launch version of Gotham Knights. It just will. And so like, it's just something that they gotta figure it out. So I don't know. Maybe it's a conspiracy theory. Maybe it's just that it wasn't a priority. I don't know. But it's freaking weird to me that we constantly see this. Like, constantly see this.
And the game is in pretty reasonable shape there. We're still CPU limited to some degree during select frames when targeting 60 FPS, but the game is mostly a solid 60 here. Lowering the view detail and environmental density settings can help here though, and uncapped performance tends to average around 100 FPS in the open world. I'm not completely happy with the way that performance is scaling on PC, as a consistent 60 FPS is out of reach for most mainstream systems, which feels a bit gratuitous given how this game looks. Plus, the cutscene animation issues do return here, at least at 60 FPS, with jittery movement like on the Xbox Series consoles. But as long as you have a fast CPU with high clock speeds, Gotham Knights can mostly deliver a pretty good experience here, with much improved fluidity over the consoles.
It's just, I mean, again, it's baffling. This game comes out 7 years after Arkham Knight, and across the board looks way, way worse. Even the PC version of Arkham Knight, which launched pretty rough, I mean, let's be real, it was pretty bad. Even that still now runs very, very well. Perhaps not as well as it could, but still.
After some further reflection, I think Gotham Knights' visuals, while largely unchanged in this version, do deserve considerable praise. Ultimately, Gotham Knights is best understood as a game of two halves. The first half is the game's mission environments. Basically, anytime you start a major mission, Gotham Knights loads into a space that features pretty solid visuals. Lighting is a particular standout in these environments. Each of the game's interior spaces features very attractive ambient lighting with excellent GI and well-placed light sources. Technically speaking, it's basically par for the course, with big-budget Unreal Engine 4 titles, but it often looks excellent. There's plenty of fog, volumetrics, and smoke in these areas as well, which gives them a sort of organic quality. The assets also impress here. Again, this isn't exactly generation-defining stuff, but geometric density and texture resolution are both suitably high. The artwork here holds up well at close range, and the game itself has a lot of asset variety with key story areas showcasing very different interior stylings. If you just evaluated Gotham Knights on the indoor segments alone, it would seem like a very good-looking game. A lot of effort has clearly been expended to make these spaces look unique and attractive, with capable rendering technology combined with carefully crafted artwork and visual design. The other half of the game is set in Gotham City itself, and this is really where the game's visual issues become apparent. A lot of my concerns here come down to the game's lighting quality. Gotham Knights open world does have a lot of light sources, but ambient lighting basically seems non-existent. Lights are often surrounded by large spaces of very dark color, as if each light has no contribution to the overall scene lighting. My broad impression is that GI is largely missing in the open world environment. It's hard to escape the feeling that Gotham Knights lighting is broken, with stark, contrasty lighting that lacks the sort of information needed to build a convincing lighting setup.
And I think that's part of what makes the game just feel off. Like, you're exploring the open world, and there's just something about it that doesn't click. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of phenomenon in artwork like this where lighting sources don't match up properly, and so it just doesn't look right. Is there a term for that? Like, I would think there probably is. But you look at clips of like Arkham Knight. I just pulled this up. So this, to be clear, is not my footage, but this is Throneful. But you look at this, and all of a sudden, like, you see that the lighting is very coherent. It feels like dark, but it also feels like the light is more realistic. It feels more in tune with what you would expect. And I think in Gotham Knights, you go through the map, and it just doesn't feel like you're exploring a coherent piece. It feels like you're exploring a place with like hundreds of individual little set pieces that have been plopped in. But like, you look at that, the light here reflects off the ground there, which seems to bounce up and light up the rest of the wall. And then this light is really bright, and it lights up the area around it and all the rain, and also part of this crossbeam here. So that seems legit. This light is reflecting off of this building, so then it bounces back up, and you see the lighting hitting all of this. So it feels, and even out here, like this sign is reflecting off the wet ground over here. So is this sign reflecting off of this down here. There's all of this stuff, and this isn't even directly tied to ray tracing. This is just quality lighting, and it just goes to show you like just how bad Gotham Knights lighting is. But this is, I mean, it's one of the staples of cinematography in general, is that good lighting will always beat out a really good camera. It'll always beat out a really, really good, lens. Those things help, certainly, but the way that you take your image to the next step from a foundational level is by lighting. Because you can't fix bad lighting with a really good camera. You can't fix bad lighting in a game with ray tracing. Like, if the lighting is bad, if the artistic aspect of the lighting is bad, there's just nothing you can do. It just sucks. Like, just sucks. Pretty simple. So, yeah, it's really heartbreaking, because again, Gotham Knights could have been so good. And you guys remember, I tried to look at the positive with Gotham Knights. I was like, maybe It's going to be really good. Maybe the advertising's just been stupid, but then they show me up and manage to make it look terrible. So I don't know. So anyway, I'm still kind of butthurt about Gotham Knights because it could have been something great. We could have had everything. He took my thing. Red flag.